Well, good morning, church. Good morning. Trust everybody's doing well. Yeah. Good to see you this morning. Thank you. Yeah. Wow, what a joy to be with you. Excuse me. What a joy and an honor and a privilege it is to be with you. I come from around the Atlanta, Georgia area and had the privilege to meet your pastors last year, played golf with your pastor, and move on, okay, all right, we'll move on. It was fun. You really get to know people on the golf course, right? And just a lovely man, and you can't be as good of a man as he is without someone standing next to him who's even better. And that is his lovely bride, Nina. So you guys, listen, let me tell you something. I have the privilege to travel the world, and I'm in a different church every weekend somewhere around the world. And I meet pastors all the time. And let me just tell you, you have two of the most choice Christian servants that you could ever have leading you in this beautiful church than your pastors, Mark and Nina Elmendorf. So you better never take them for granted. Amen? Amen. Well, I've been married to my wife, my beautiful wife, for 18 years. I was a smart man. I got married in January of the year 2000. So, January the 7th of 2000. I didn't wait because, you know, there's a 6-day window that I could get it wrong. But how long have you been married? 18 years, right. We had 4 beautiful biological children. 4. Yeah, 4 of them. 2 girls, a boy, and another girl. And then one night, my wife leans over to me and says, "Hey." I was like, "Hey." Joe, it wasn't that kind of hey. It was not that kind of hey. It was, hey, I need you to pray about something. So I learned very quickly that anytime your wife tells you that you need to pray about something, what that really means is she has already prayed about it and has heard from God and just needs you to get on the same page with her. That's what that means. That's what that means, yeah. And all the ladies in the house said, amen. Right, see, there you go. And it was great because she says, yeah, I want you to pray. I just really feel like we're supposed to adopt this teenage girl. A teenager. Like, I never want teenagers, period, right? But to adopt one that's already one, right? You better heard from God. Well, I said, wow, babe, we already have kids. We've got 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a lot. You want to bring one more? Oh, my word. She said, oh, just pray about it. I said, well, what's her story? You see, my wife runs the child and adolescent division of Albany Mental Health. She works with the most at-risk kids in our community. She has over 300 children under her care, and with just many of them severe mental health issues. And Precious was involved with her program. She has an after-school program as well, where kids come in after school that have academic issues, behavioral issues, and mental health issues, many of which who are in the foster care system for whatever reason. Well, Precious was one of them. When she first met her, she was 12 years old, and she found out that this girl was born to a 13-year-old girl who had been raped by a man who went to prison before she was even born. because he murdered 2 people in Atlanta, Georgia. He is serving 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He never put his name on the birth certificate. She doesn't know who he is and never will. But her mom, being 13 and living on her own, basically, had several relationships. And by the time Precious was 9 years old, she had 2 siblings, 5 and 3. And her mother went away for 5 days to party and do drugs and binging, and left her alone by herself to take care of the 2 kids. And the crazy part was, she did it at 9. So the authorities found out the mother had her rights taken away, and the kids went bouncing around into foster care homes. Till one day, they met a family, and they were all together having dinner. Precious excused herself to go to the restroom, and while she was gone, the parents said, "Oh yeah, boys, well, guess what? We're going to adopt you." And everybody's, "Yay!" And there was celebration. Precious comes back, and the boys say, "Precious, we're getting adopted." And the parents said, "Oh, no, sorry, we want the boys." But they looked at her and said, "But we don't want you." And so somehow this family adopted the boys, and then she starts bouncing around back into different homes. And that's when my wife found her. And so she said, "Yeah, so pray about that." Right. What do you do? Okay, Lord. Well, all right. Yeah, there you go. Sure, why not? Right? You can't hear something like that and know that adoption is the heartbeat of God, because all of us have been grafted in, right? We have been adopted in, you know? You can't hear something like that and not be at least moved to pray about it and consider it, but knowing that that's the heart of God. You know, in the United States of America, if 3 families from every single church in the United States would foster and adopt a child, there would be no more kids to be taken care of. Just 3 families from every church in America. Wow. So we started the process. We started doing all the forms, doing all the classes, doing all the stuff. It was an 8-month process. So finally she comes to us. She started doing weekend visits during the summer months in between school. And then she came to us to live with us full time when she was in grade 10. On completion of her 10th grade year, she comes into my office with a folded up piece of paper, slides it across the desk, like she's making me an offer I couldn't refuse, right? She just kind of sliding that across the desk. And she says, "Get a look at that." Opened it up. It was her report card. She'd made the A-B honor roll for the first time in her life. It was so good. It was so good. And then she says, "You know, Dad," because she called me Dad since day one. She'd never known a dad. Any man that she's ever known has abused her. Verbally, physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally, has abused her. But she called me Dad. And she said, I don't know why y'all chose me, but Dad, one day I'll make y'all proud you did. I said, "Oh, honey, you don't ever have to do anything to earn our pride, ever." Well, we were trying to adopt, make it official and final, but the state of Georgia comes down, and there's this big panel of people. There's about 8 or 9 people. They're sitting on a platform like this, and my wife and I are sitting right here, and there's all these papers and stamps and all these people, right, who just were miserable, angry-looking people. They hated life and themselves, I guess, for what they had to be doing, right? So they said, "We're not going to allow you to adopt her." We're like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, we don't like interracial adoptions." because Precious is black, right? And if you hadn't noticed, I'm not. But I am in my soul. I am in my soul. Deep down, I'm a black man, okay? I just am. I am. Not saying God made any mistakes. However, so they said, yeah, we don't like we're tired of white people trying to rescue black kids. You can foster her, she can be in your home, but there's no need to adopt her. She's 15 years old. There's no need for that. And we're like, why not give her a new identity? Why not give her a new name? She's been grafted into a family. Why not give her a new name? And they're like, well, it just doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? It's worked so far. What would be the difference? And then this lady goes, sir, I have one question for you. And I'm like, oh man, one question. What does this mean? Okay. She said, what do you know about taking care of African American hair? Like, that's the one question you want to know the answer to. What do I know about taking care of African American hair? I said, well, I do know this. I played Jesus in an Easter production. And I had a weave put in. And I said, I know you pat it, you don't scratch it. Okay, that's what I know. That's what I know right there. That's what I know. Okay? Yeah, it's true. So I said, ma'am, let me tell you why we want to do this. Okay, let me tell you why we want to do this. I said, because I heard this story years ago about two heroin-addicted drug dealers who the father had gone to prison and the mother had taken their 6-year-old and newborn infant and moved them to where his family lived so they could be closer to family. And she was trying to escape her old life and to have a fresh start and get something new going on. But how many of you know, unless you deal with the issues that are resident within your heart, you could move halfway across the world, but wherever you go, there you are. And they'll follow you wherever you go. It's true. And so she found herself immediately back into the drug scene. So she takes her little kids into her sister-in-law's place of business, into this beauty salon. And she says, hey, could you watch the kids just for a second? I'll be right back. She's like, okay. Well, she had gone away and pulled out a gun out of her purse and robbed several stores at gunpoint to get money for her drugs. She comes back and she says, hey, could you do me a favor and babysit for me tonight? She's going through heroin withdrawals. So she's visibly, She goes, look, I can take the 6-year-old, but I have a baby myself. I can't take care of 2 babies. Why don't you go talk to one of the hairstylists over here? She doesn't have anybody currently. Maybe you can just talk to her and see what she can do. Okay. So she goes over and she says, ma'am, I heard you're so nice. I heard you're incredibly nice. Would you do me a favor and watch my baby for me tonight? To a total stranger. And she goes, okay, well, sure. I'd be glad to help. So this lady hands her 3-month-old with nothing on but a 2-day-old diaper. And that was it. And said, thank you. And she left. Friday night turned into Saturday night, turned into Sunday night. And she finally shows back up at this lady's house, knocks on her door. And when the door opens, she was greeted with a smile, and then she noticed that this couple had gone to the store. And there was a month's worth of diapers and wipes and baby supplies and clothes and all kind of stuff. And she was moved to tears, not because she thought, all this is going home with me, but she was moved to tears because she thought, I've got a babysitter now. She said, this is so great. They started packing it up to take to her car. She goes, no. Why don't we just leave this here? Let's just leave this here. That'd be great. And that way, we can do this again next weekend. And sure enough, that's what happened. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. There was a knock at the door, but instead it wasn't the mother of the baby, it was the father. He'd gotten out of jail, come up to where they were, and totally distraught, looks at this couple and says, listen, my wife has had an overdose. The doctor says she's going to be okay, that she's going to make it. However, I'm going back to jail. And I need somebody to take care of the baby. I don't know how long I'm going to be in prison. I don't know how long she's going to take. But I'm giving my 6-year-old to my sister. Please, take the baby, raise him as your own. All I have is a high chair and a birth certificate. Here. And he left. Now, what they didn't know was 2 weeks previous, that couple found out they physically couldn't have kids. She'd had 3 miscarriages. And the doctor said, you can just keep trying, but you're never, ever going to be able to have a baby. And so they called their pastor over. And the pastor came over and laid hands on them and said, God, somehow, some way, bring this family a baby boy. And then 2 weeks later, in walks a heroin-addicted drug dealer and said, here you go. I told that story to that lady that day, and I said, ma'am, all those years ago, that little baby was me. And I said, ma'am, I had a chance at life. There's no telling what my life would have turned out to be had I been raised by these folks right here. I did come to learn that eventually my biological father was killed when I was 2 years old because he robbed a chemist. And the chemist was tired of being robbed, and so he had a gun as well. And as my father was leaving, he shot him in the back. His driver saw that he was shot, drove him around till he bled out and bled to death, and then dumped his body out on the emergency room doorsteps. I never met him. But this family was the only family I ever knew. And they were great. They were awesome. Wonderful people. Wonderful, like church-going folks. And like we went to church all the time. And I mean all the time. Anytime the doors were open, we were there. Even if they weren't open, we were just pulling in the parking lot just to make sure. Oh, somebody left a light on. Maybe there's a Bible study going on in here. Good God, no, it's Thursday. Nobody's doing anything on Thursday night. No. But we were there, man. Right? Now, I grew up, going all the time, and I was a little kid sitting over here, like on the second row, like where you two, wonderful young couple right here are sitting. And my mother was great because she grew up in an era, in early Pentecostal roots, where women didn't wear makeup and they had a bun on the top of their head, like some of you dudes in here today. Yeah. Yes. Some of you dudes would have fit in the 50s in Pentecost. And but then like she would tell you that, oh, I just got delivered from all that. And then she went from like real staunch floor length to like way over here, like big hair, like makeup caked on her face, eyelashes that would wave at you when she blinked, And like she had jewelry. She had jewelry on every, she had a Mr. T starter set, right? You just kind of had all this going on. Well, there was one day that, my mom, we're just sitting in church, pastor's preaching. He's got the whole thing going. And then so we're sitting over here, and all of a sudden, out from underneath the organ crawls the biggest cockroach you've ever seen. Now, this does not shock any of you here. When I told my mom, hey, I'm going to Australia again, she goes, baby, now you know everything in this world that can kill you lives there, right? So just be careful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so, but she's definitely afraid of insects, right? So out crawls this little thing, one of those flying cockroaches, right? Huge, huge. And it's coming straight for her. So she's just listening. She goes, yes, amen. And she saw him. And then I'm sitting there, I'm like 7 or 8 years old. I'm going, oh, it's going to be good. This is going to be good. Because he's going straight for her. And she's like, oh, yes, amen, Pastor, yeah. You know, she's squirming. Well, I'm watching this, and all of a sudden, he disappeared. She lost him, and she goes. And then all of a sudden, something hits her shoulder. And in the middle of the preaching, she stands up and goes, woo-hoo! Like this. Well, everybody had thought she caught the Holy Ghost, right? That's what everybody thought. So everybody stands up going, woo! And everybody starts. The band cranks up and then revival hits. All because my mom's earring fell out of her ear and hit her shoulder. That's what it was. That's what it was. That's what it was. But we had church that night, man. Awesome. So then, you know, it was great. It was great. We had a great family. Until my dad, who had started his own business, was hemorrhaging money. He just wasn't making it. He was struggling profoundly. And the only way he could cope was through alcohol. And that's all he was using to numb his pain of feeling like a failure, feeling unsuccessful, feeling like he wasn't providing for his family, numbing. Instead of leaning into his pain, admitting it, dealing with it, he was numbing the inevitable. And to the point that he would stay in bars on Friday nights until 2 a.m. Saturday. That's when the bars would shut down. And it got to the point where my mom would leave our phone number for the bar to call us to come get him. So I'm a little kid, every Friday, Saturday night, going to pick up my dad, dragging his drunken self out of the bar and bringing him home. There was one night I'll never forget, we dragged him upstairs, he'd vomited all over himself, and we just left him in the tub. Then he started getting aggressive and started pushing my mom around a little bit. Until one day he comes to me when I'm 11 and he says, son, I want to tell you something. I don't love your mother anymore. I've met someone else and I'm leaving. And I'm like, what? You got to be kidding. I don't know how to take that. Well, he had gone off drinking that night and then comes home, and I was awakened early in the morning because he'd thrown my mom into the wall and left a crater. I came into the room and there she was laying on the floor crying, and he was yelling, and she's begging him not to leave. And so I hear that and I'm still confused by that. Why don't you just let him go? Right? Well, then I go over to the door, put my hand on the doorknob, and I said, Dad, please don't leave. I need you here. We need you here. Come on. Well, he pushes me out of the way, opens the door, and before it could close, I wedged my foot between it and the frame. And I just opened it back up, and I said, hey! Oh, you okay? Yeah, okay. Sorry, she literally jumped out of her seat. I'm sorry. Again, Pastor, you got to keep them awake somehow. You got to keep them awake. I said, hey. I said, if you leave, don't you ever expect to come back. And I'll be the man of the house. I was 11. And he left. I remember the next morning sitting at the kitchen table. My mom had been crying all night. She obviously didn't sleep. And I said, what are we going to do? She sat there for a minute. And she pushed back from the table. And she grabbed my hand. And we walked over to the couch. Next to the couch was a basket full of about 23 different Bibles. She picked one of them out. It was a green leather-bound Bible. And she flipped it open to Proverbs chapter 3. And she read verse 5 and 6. And it says this: trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Don't lean into your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. She said, son, we are going to trust in the Lord. And she grabbed my hand right there, and she started praying for my dad. Wow. So we were all each other had, me and my mom. By American standards, we would be considered poor. There were times and nights that we didn't know what we were going to have for dinner. There was one in particular. I remember going to the cupboard. I kind of came in. My mom's sitting at the kitchen table. You could tell very distraught and emotional. And opened the door to the pantry and, what's for dinner? And she said, I don't know. You know, you can only have noodles with butter so many times, right? And I said, well, I came over and sat down and said, Mom, what are we going to do? She pushed back from the table. She grabbed my hand, and we walked over to that couch. She pulled out that green leather-bound Bible that had been bookmarked to Proverbs chapter 3, and she read verse 5 and 6. She said, we are going to trust in the Lord with all of our heart. We're not going to lean to our own understanding, but in all our ways, we're going to acknowledge Him. We're going to become aware of His presence in our life, and He will make our path straight. She grabbed my hand and she began to pray. She said, God, we are tithers and we are givers. We are covenant partners with you. Your word says that I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging for bread. So we are believing you for our sustenance and our dinner tonight. And I'm just like, whatever. Like how, and I'm just kind of standing around like all 12, 13-year-olds stand. You've seen them. You know who you are. 12-year-old in here today going, I'm offended by that. Well, look in the mirror, okay? Just look in the mirror. That's how you stand. 10 minutes later, the phone rings. It's my mom's cousin from down the street. He said, hey, I've made this big pot of chili or soup. He said, we can't eat it all. Have y'all had dinner yet? Are you hungry? She goes, as a matter of fact, we have not, and yes, we are. He says, well, I'll be right down. She goes, thank you very much. And she hung up the phone. Like, this is how old I am, right? Hung up the phone. Yeah. Like the avocado green phone on the wall that turned like this. That you never called people if they had a 0 in their number. He just never did it. Well, he comes down, brings the food down, and my mom turns to him and she goes, see? I told you so. Right there. She said, we can trust in the Lord with all our heart. I remember there were nights when I could hear her praying for people. I didn't know what it was at first. I thought she was just talking on the phone, but I'm like, who's she talking to? It's like 11 o'clock at night. Who's she talking to? But she was praying for people, but most of all, she was praying for my dad. The door was cracked, and I just kind of peeked in. I'm like, what's going on? And she was knelt down beside the bed with one of his old handkerchiefs in her hand that still had his cologne scent on it. Brute. You know that scent. You'd know that anywhere, right? Brute, man. You could put that on 6 years ago, and it like that just gets into your pores. Your pastor is a brute man. I know he is. He's a brute man. So you're going to get a lot of Christmas presents. You're going to get a lot of brute this year. I can just feel it. I can feel it. Well, she had that handkerchief, and I would hear her calling out to God on behalf of my dad. Her prayer was never, God, bring him home, because who wants an alcoholic wife beater back in the house? Her prayer was always, God, save him, God, change him, God, deliver him, God, set him free. Whatever the deepest, darkest, painful places in his heart, whatever resides there, God, just rip that out of his heart and pour all your love into him and save him. That went on for 3 years. And I just grew to not even care about him. I was 14 years old. He shows up to one of my high school basketball games, and he said, after the game, he said, son, I want to tell you something. It was the first time I'd seen him sober in 3 years. Son, I want to tell you something. I've given my life back to Jesus. I've talked to your mother, and I want to come home. I've asked forgiveness from the Lord. I've asked forgiveness from your mother. And I've even asked forgiveness from your grandparents. And I just want to know if I can come home and be the husband and father that I haven't been. And he said, because I'm asking you, you're the last one. Because I remember something you said to me 3 years ago. That if I left, you'd be the man of the house. So I'm asking the man of the house if I can come home and actually be one. I was at a crossroads at that point because it had just been me and my mom for so long. And it's like, how do I know this isn't, just something put on? But I could see the sincerity in his face and the genuine tears flowing. And I said, I think that'd be great. He put his arms around me and hugged me for the first time in a long, long time. And he said, son, I want to tell you something. I'm so proud of you, and I love you. So I love you too, Dad. He said, now look, I've got to go back to her house and finish packing. She's out of town on business. And when I'm done, it's probably going to be way late. But I'll come over first thing in the morning, and we'll all go to church together. I'm like, wow. We're going to go to church as a family for the first time in years. God had truly done a miracle. That night we go to bed, and good night, Mom. We're all kind of excited. But then 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. My mom comes barreling in my room and says, come on, we got to go get your dad. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't want to go. She's like, no, come on, you have to. Let's go, we got to hurry. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So all that was a show then. That was a front. So we get in the car, we're driving, and she says, just pray for your dad, baby, just pray for your dad. I'm like, I don't want to pray for him. We get to the stop sign where we would normally turn right to go to the Shade Tree Bar and Grill in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. But instead we turned left to go to Southern Hills Medical Center. Because that night he had a heart attack and he died. I'll never forget walking in with my mom and I kind of stopped and froze as the emergency room doctor came out, explaining to her that his condolences because they had done everything that they could, but they could not revive him. And I'm listening to him tell my mother that everything that she'd prayed for, everything that she'd believed God for has now been pulled out from underneath her in an instant. And I froze. She had to go back and identify his body. And as she came back around, I don't even know how long. It felt like an eternity. I don't even know how long it was. But those glass doors that separate you, when I saw her come around the corner, I didn't want her to see me because she was visibly shaken. She could barely walk. And I kind of slid back over and kind of hid sort of in the waiting room. And I watched her as she tried to let it all out before she came to get me. But she was beating on that glass with her face pressed up against it, slid down to the floor into the fetal position, having lost everything that she'd believed God for. And I watched her finally gain her composure as some of the nurses helped her up. And then I just went totally into the waiting room, acting like I never saw it. She came in and we just sat there for another hour or two and finally got up enough strength to go home. Got home around 5 a.m. and you don't really sleep that much. But it was about 7:30 in the morning when we both kind of made our way to the kitchen. We're sitting at the kitchen table, and with a broken heart, my mom is just staring into nothing. And I just uttered these words: "What are we going to do?" And with tears pouring, she pushed back that chair and she grabbed my hand and we walked to that couch and she grabbed that green leather-bound Bible and she opened it up to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. And with chin and voice quivering, she said, "Son, we're going to do this. We're going to trust in the Lord with all of our heart." You see, friends, trust only works in the dark. Trust only works when you can't see your hand in front of your face how to navigate your own path. When you can't see how to get out of the situation that you're currently in. That's when trust truly works. When it's pitch black, when the lights go out. Trust needs friction. It's easy to say yes and amen when things are going great. But what happens when the lights go out? Where do you turn? Man, I was running from God. I promise you, I ran from God. I played the church game, but I was running from God. There was my mom screamed one day about 8 months later, and I was so worried about her. I came running in. I was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" This was on a Thursday. She said, "Oh, I got this letter from the Internal Revenue Service, from the government, that said we owed $15,000 on my dad's business, or they were going to come start taking things away from our house. They were going to take her car. They were going to take all the stuff until the debt is repaid." Okay. She didn't make that much money in a year. So she said this. She said, "Son, I want you to pray about something." I'm like, "Oh, okay, what?" She said, "Sunday there's a missionary coming to our church. And I want us to pray about what it is we're supposed to give." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." She said, "No, really pray about it." I'm like, "Okay." prayed about it. We're driving to church. She said, what did the Lord speak to you for us to give? I said, $50. She's driving. She said, look at my purse. Look at my checkbook. Open it up. She'd already written it out for $50. In the register, it said we had $53 left for the week. Now, I'm no mathematician. But if you take 50 away from 53, that leaves you with $3. I said, what are we going to do? She's driving. She was like Jesus with the disciples, how long must I be with you? Just open my Bible, pull the bookmark out, and read it. Proverbs chapter 3, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. She said, son, that $50, that's not going to pay off $15,000. But she goes, it will further the gospel. And she said, son, anything mixed with God is everything we need. We're going to trust in the Lord with all our heart. 2 weeks later, his friend, 2 weeks later, she got another letter in the mail. She screamed again. I come running in. I'm like, oh, great. Did they double it? What happened? What's going on? She said, look at this. The government of the United States Treasury, the Internal Revenue Service, sent us a letter in the mail to tell us, oh, we must have had a clerical error because we now see that you owe absolutely nothing. You're free and clear. And she said, see, I told you. I told you. So friend, look, I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what's happening with you, but I do know you can trust in the Lord with all your heart. I sat there and told that whole panel that one day, that whole story. By this time, that lady had taken off her glasses and she's wiping her face. And she said, that's all I needed to know, sir. And she grabbed that stamp and marked the adoption approved. And she became Jordan Precious Spears that day. Yeah. Sometimes people just need to know your why, right? You need to know why you want to do something. But I don't know where you are or what's going on in your life. Maybe at one time you had given away a baby. Maybe you've had an abortion. I don't know. Maybe you can't have kids, and that's all you're believing God for is a baby. Maybe you have a wayward, drunken husband who is abusive. Maybe you're here and your wife has left you. Maybe you have a wayward son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter. Maybe you're in financial turmoil. I don't know, friend. But what I do know is that God brought me a long way to tell you that no matter where you find yourself or how dark it might be, that you can trust in the Lord with all of your heart.